had 2 or 3 people just flying those things around, and we went back and removed the wires later. And at the time we were doing it, thinking, this is ridiculous, it's not going to work, but I think it looks pretty good, if not completely acceptable. So, yeah, at any rate, that's a tip for ongoing. Try to keep your shooting days as high as you can. There's nothing like that time.
I know I saw a hand up here earlier, right in the middle.
Yeah, how old were you when you did Phantasm?
Well, it was a long experience. I think I started it when I was 22 and a half, maybe, and I think the movie came out when I was 25. Something. It was about a 2-3 year. It was a real epic production because that was done on even less money than this, amazingly. But yeah, that was a long time ago. It's funny that the movie has had resonance, that people still talk about it, because at that time, you know, we were just trying to make a little horror movie, you know, hope to get it into some theaters, and you know, the fact that, you know, 30 years later, people are still watching it's just mind-blowing to me, actually.
We did something amazing with Phantasm, since we're going to go to Phantasm for a second.
Yeah.
Because you shot so much footage for the first movie, and you've stayed with the project through the entire time you've had it.
That's true. Yeah.
You've been able to do something that probably no other director, I think, in history has been able to do, which is to actually put unused footage for your first movie into subsequent movies to flesh out the story even more. So I think that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
It was all part of the grand plan. From the beginning, I knew I was going to do that.
No plan at all.
No, that first film we had shot, it was about a 3-hour epic, and it got whittled down to 90 minutes, and for years, you know, I had all this footage left over. And actually, I'd forgotten where it was, and it was funny, we got this phone call one day, actually came to my phone from MGM, and they were closing their lab. They said, we have all these cans of this stuff, you should come pick it up. You know, and I went down there and picked it up, and it was all this negative left over, the outtakes that we had not put into the original Phantasm. So then when we were a little budget limited in the making of the 4th Phantasm, I came on this idea where I could grab about 15 minutes of footage from the original and then save some money, and it worked out pretty well. I think the most interesting part of it is that in one scene you've got the actor, he's 12 years old, and then the next scene he's like 35. It's pretty, you know, that is hard to plan in advance. So, anyway, interesting little detail about an old horror movie. So,
in black.
Lately you've done, what's happened in this movie, a more comedic style film. Have you thought about going back to something a little more or general horror, or is that just kind of a general, I guess, where your path has led to more comedic horror?
Well, you know, the weird part about it is that I think if you take the time one day to revisit the first Phantasm, it's got some pretty out there funny moments in it. So I don't know if it's just my style to always try to be funny. I don't know. It's something weird about myself. But I think going forward, yeah, I'm always interested in trying to make a straight horror film. It's just that, wow, you got to come up with a concept that's so fantastic, and you know, once every 5 years, 8 years, somebody comes across something really wonderful, you know, and then Hollywood makes like 12 more, you know, analog rip-offs of it till it's dead. But I guess I'm still looking for that concept. You know, I mean, I wish I could be as brilliant as the local Blair Witch filmmakers and come up with that about having the actors film their own scenes. I love that. But and it's funny how that movie, you know, the found footage went away. You know, I think there were a couple other ones, and then it went away, and then now it's come back. You know, 12 years later with a vengeance. I think how the cycles work. But
Your Masters of Horror episode was straight horror, though.
yeah, it was. It was. But it was. You know, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just that I'm always looking for something other. See, I looked at it as a female empowerment movie.
Yeah, very
to
much.
tell you the truth, but in the context of horror, and so you know, I think that's probably why I made Bubba Hotep and why I made this. Is I I'm always interested in genre mashups, you know, where things are a little different, not exactly the same thing. I think that's what I liked about the Bubba Hotep story when I read it, which was this idea that you had Elvis fighting a mummy. I mean, that was the little log line that I read, and I thought, oh, this sounds great. It really was a great short story.
Well, we had, right over here, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about like where you might see, you know, that narrative style taking you in the future. And you had such a good. It seemed like you and Bruce, and reading some of what Bruce had said, working at Bubba Hotep, and seeing how well Paul Giamatti got together to do this. Do you see yourself working with them in the future on anything?
Well, see, that was the unfortunate thing with this sequel to Bubba Hotep, because for those of you who hadn't seen it, what I told you was a story about Elvis, and we find him as an old man, and he finds this mummy that's feasting on the souls of the old people in the rest home where Elvis is. And so I wrote this sequel to it, which I really think is a wonderful script. And what's cool about it is it really goes into the real legend of Elvis can't be complete without examining the effect that his manager, Tom Parker, had on him. I mean, this was a guy who had a Svengali-like control over Elvis. I mean, Elvis fans hate this guy and feel like he's the one that basically drove him to his death. But, you know, I mean, there's so many levels on it. Becoming an Elvis fan, I know I'm now going into Elvis, but becoming an Elvis fan myself, that Colonel Parker would never allow Elvis to tour outside of America. Elvis never played in Tokyo. He never played in London because supposedly Colonel Parker was in the country illegally. He couldn't leave America, and this, you know, he really had this negative impact. And of course, not to mention the choice of movie roles, which Elvis was forced to star in. But the point being is that I had this idea to do a sequel where we really investigate the control that Colonel Parker had over Elvis. And of course, vampirism would be the source of that. And I pitched this crazy idea to Paul Giamatti. The idea was that he would play Colonel Parker and Bruce would play Elvis. And it was just like, you know, a match made in heaven. And the script is really genuinely one of the best things I've ever done. I don't know, we presented it to Bruce, he declined to participate. I don't know why, you have to ask him. I think the guy's a wonderful talent, he's magnificent in Bubba Hotep. I'd like to actually see him in more movies, you know? So, anyway, thank you all for coming out tonight and staying so late. I see one more.
Yeah, let's do like one more. Go ahead.
I was just curious, I've seen that the writer is already working on a sequel to this book, and I was curious if it's too soon to tell, but will any or some of you come back for a sequel? Because this is really great, I really enjoyed this.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for those comments. The writer's very prolific. By the way, his day job, if you ever want to tune in, is he's the senior editor at this website, crack.com, which is hilarious. I mean, every day he's writing funny stuff. But yeah, he's got this new book. It's called This Book is Full of Spiders. And I haven't read it yet, but I've got a vague idea what it's about. And if this movie connected with audiences and there was an ability to raise some funding, it would be great to go and continue the adventures of John and Dave. But if that doesn't happen, I was happy that we were able to take one segment in the titles, sort of show what a sequel might look like a little bit, which is something I'm thinking I might do in future movies, which over the title, you know, some directors have their own little end title sequence. I'm thinking, yeah, why not do a little mini sequel in every movie that you do, which is kind of a fun way to leave the audience like that. But you should, if you, once again, not to pimp David Wong's book, but there's so much more in the book that we didn't have the resources to get in the movie. So if any of this appealed to you, there's loads of fun if you buy his book and read it. So anyhow, so any more, or shall we wrap this up? Thank you all for...
One last one? All right, you.
When you were making the first Phantasm film and the subsequent sequels, did you actually have a definitive
in terms of Phantasm, when I started the first movie, absolutely it had an ending. I mean, you know, the curtain drops, bam, tall man wins, everybody loses, and that was my plan. But the movie was, you know, it's just a weird thing. It's like that movie has become so dear to so many people. And as the years went by afterwards, people would talk to me passionately about the movie. And they would have ideas about where it would go. And so then, you know, I was having difficulty getting any of my other projects funded. And there was always money to make these Phantasm movies. So then we started the second one. And then decided that we really didn't have a conclusion that I could think of, so we left that one open-ended, left the third one. The fourth one, you know, sort of wrapped it up. One could look at it that way. But, you know, those actors are still around, and we're still cooking up, trying to do something else with that. So hopefully, maybe we'll be back here next year with something.
Woo!
On that note,
Yes.
on that note,
Thank you so much. We really
thanks, Don, for coming out tonight. And we'll be back here tomorrow night showing it one more time, or right there at Winter Park. But thank you guys for all coming out too. It's been a phenomenal night.
The video took